Welcome to Volume 19 of Captain Harold DeMarrero's River Stories. Today, Captain wants to finish up on a story about the Jag that he's got a couple points he wants to clear up. So take it away, Cap.
You know, it's nice to tell my stories about the river, about what was happening to me, but I really want this to encompass a history of the river, and to do that, you have to know what else was happening on the river while I was captain on the Jag. And another important thing that I'd left out was these companies had now started to get rid of the captains, the two that broke out of the union. Both of them, before they fired the captain, the president of the company, who was a river captain, and they fired them and then replaced them with accountants and lawyers, because these companies were growing so fast that now they had boards of directors and everything, and they just didn't think that a river captain had the smarts to run a river company. So anyway, that was one of the things that was starting to happen. And another was the Coast Guard. But the Coast Guard's now been on the river, about 12, 13 years. They were in charge of the river, but not on the river. So now, at these inspections where you get your license, the guys that gave these licenses were an actual licensed pilot. When I got my pilot license, it was under a guy who had a pilot license over the route that I wanted to draw and get put onto my license. And then an engineer that wanted to get a license, he would go up, and it was a guy that was actually an engineer that gave him his examination. And but now the Coast Guard has come in by this time. They're starting to take over. These guys are getting old. They don't resent the fact of they're having to pay them at the wages they would make if they were in the industry. So these guys, they're letting them die out, and they're replacing them with just petty officers out of the Coast Guard. And in order to do that, now these guys don't know anything about the river. They're going to give a river examination, and all these questions are essay questions and everything. There's no way for them to do it, so the Coast Guard makes the test multiple choice. And they go through these questions and answers, and they get them down to this is the right answer, this is the wrong answer. Doesn't matter if the original question would have had 30, 40 lines of essay to explain it. This is now multiple choice.
They saved a lot of money. Did they sacrifice safety or anything?
Absolutely, they sacrificed safety, because you had people in there giving out licenses that didn't know what they were doing. And instead of, when you draw the river for a river pilot, then you don't draw it like a map. You draw it the way you see it in your head. And the turns might not be the way they are on a map. But when the Coast Guard come in and going to grade a pilot examination over a route, it had to be like the map. It had to be exactly like the map, because that's all they had to go by. And now, we used to have to give the river mileage every 5 miles. Now the Coast Guard comes in and says, well, we're going to make this more difficult. You're going to have to name every light, and you're going to have to give whether it's got a dayboard, and you're going to have to give how many flashes per minute that this light emits, and you're going to have to give the mileage of that light with the tenth. And if you miss one of the, like you put 341.4 and it's 0.5, we're going to take so many points off of your grade to do this. And so, but that was supposed to be an improvement over, it was a joke. But then that's the way it was at that time. They were just starting that. And then the companies, they were enjoying this, and more they were growing. The industry between 1950 and 1960 doubled. The amount of boats doubled over what it was in 50 to 60. and the amount of barges doubled. So this was growing, in 10 years it's doubled in size. It's really growing. So, yeah, and then they started building more boats. These companies that had stayed in the Union, they decided, well, in order for us to compete with the guys that got out of the Union because of the wages, we're going to build bigger boats, and you're going to push more barges. And so one same crew is going to do twice as much work, move twice as many barges. And they did that. They built, at that time, they had built several 6,000 horsepower boats that were towing around 25, 30 barges at the time, which is a lot considering the way the river was back then. And it was a river full of barges. And so these are all the things that was going on around me. I was working for a non-union company, a company that was, the JAG was owned by these farmers from Greenville. And when I first got on the JAG, I'm going to continue the story I had on the last one in a minute, but let me tell you my crew. These people, they didn't know anything about running a towboat company when they hired me, and they had on their boats crews that were just farm boys. These farmers, and like one of the guys that owned part of my company was George Weathers, and he had been farming 10,000 acres of cotton. So this is not a small time, He sold all his farm, Belmont Plantation, and bought into this towing company. And so...
Gave up his tractor for a tow barge.
For a tow barge. But they didn't know what they were doing, see? And the way really I got the job was Captain Jesse Brent, and I, in earlier stories I told you that I was tripping for, he told him, you want a good captain? Here's the guy. And I was on another boat when they called me. I couldn't believe it. And somebody I was working on a boat called me on a marine call and tell me, that would you like to have this job? Well, I naturally said yes. Just the prestige of having a brand new boat and be a captain of it, with guest quarters on it and everything. Nice boat, I thought. But anyway, now let's get back to the other story about the JAG. I got on it at the shipyard, left the shipyard, and the rudders on it was so messed up that it turned around 3 times before it ever centered up and let me go straight ahead. It was about that time I realized why those other guys quit, But anyway, I got it up, got it hooked up.
Anybody up on the bank laughing at you?
Probably, but it didn't bother me. I was young and, gung-ho.
Full of yourself.
Yeah, full of myself. I still am.
I know you are.
But, so I hook up to the barges and we start off up the river. And the thing was, it had a new invention these farmers had thought up. It was some sort of a valve. It was like you see on a boat today where you have a hydraulic steering, where it goes back to your ram and you turn this way. Well, this was the same way, except it was pumped because the distance was so far. And when you would push this valve and it's supposed to go over in the pilot house, the indicators that you're given 10 degrees, it might go 40. It might go 60. It might go 90. You never knew where the darn thing was.
Slop in the steering, huh?
Oh, a little bit of ever. But anyway, I was determined to make it work. And so I started working, running up and down the upper Mississippi, from St. Louis to St. Paul. And we really was pushing some very big tows for the size of the boat.
Okay, Cap, we're going to have to wrap it up. You got a right to be full of yourself. Thank everybody for watching. Come back and watch Captain Harold DeMarrero's River Stories.